Whoever is sitting with you.
Good evening, everyone. We are delighted to welcome you to the 245th session of Senda's webinar series for teachers. Today's topic is teaching approaches for an effective engagement in social studies. Our facilitator is the esteemed Miss Ashika Anand Rao. Miss Ashika Anand Rao is a seasoned education professional with extensive experience in academic planning and teachers training, particularly in Northern and Central Karnataka. She is passionate about teaching, classroom management, teacher empowerment, and innovative instructional design. Her involvement in global girls' education in Tamil Nadu and the Transformational Teaching Fellowship highlights her commitment to inclusive education and well rounded student development. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Ashika Anand Rao. Before we begin, a friendly reminder that all the participants will receive certificates for attending. To claim yours, please complete the feedback form that will be shared at the session's end. To introduce yourself, please share your name, city, and the school or the institution you represent in the chat. Thank you. Let's get started.
Thank you for the warm welcome, and I'm very excited to see so many of you here today. Some of you are enjoying your summer vacation, and others are working, but I'm really glad to see you all take part in this webinar. Together, let us all explore few strategies to empower our students, especially in social science. I'm just going to share my screen. Before I begin, I just want to know one question. What is the major challenge you face in your social classroom? So I'm going to repeat the question. What is the major challenge you face in your social classroom? Um, I would like to see some responses. Catering to different learners, absolutely. And yes, the most common problem that we face in social classroom is that students are easily bored. If I were to ask you as a teacher, what is the most common challenge that you face? uh, my challenge as a social teacher was lack of time, and also the resources that I had as a social teacher. I'm still seeing a lot of responses. Map pointing, students find it boring. Yes, yes, absolutely. So let us look at the objective of this session. First one is knowing the nature and scope of NEP in social science. And second objective of this session is different approaches and strategies to teach social science. So before I begin with the webinar, I actually want to set few norms for this. First one is please stay curious. These strategies can be well utilized in your other subjects or language classes as well. So stay curious. And second one, if you are not traveling, please grab a book and a pen, take notes, make a note of all these approaches. Some of these approaches you might already know. Look at the examples as well. Third, and the most important, which you are already doing, and I really appreciate it, please actively participate. Answer to the questions, share your thoughts, share your concerns. We are all here in this together. So, to continue, let us go with yeah, what does NEP say? There are a lot of the things that our national education policy talks about, but I'm specifically looking at what NEP talks about when it comes to social studies. The first one, which is also in other subjects or generally critical thinking. So, critical thinking, this involves inquiry, analysis, application, discovery, analysis and discovery, etc. But what is the teacher role? So, what is the teacher role according to NEP then? So, a teacher, one, should use Indian knowledge system to teach social studies. That is the first one. And the second one is critical thinking in a social studies classroom. Um, Next one is, yes, Indian knowledge system and heritage. So, especially for social studies, while talking about civilizations or while we are talking about the terms that is used in Indian constitution, for instance, um, there is a representation of how Indian knowledge system should be introduced. For example, if you are talking about how domestication began in India, so before we introduce Indus Valley civilization, so you as a teacher should be explaining that. And the second one is, another example is, um, during Vedic times, Sabha, Samiti, all these terms were used. So, how is it an integral part of Indian administration even to this day, like Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha or Panchayat Raj? How are these administrative systems still part of Indian system? The third one is experimental or experiential learning. Experiential learning is skills that is psychomotor. For example, how does this come alive in a social class? Sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Ask students to create a model on this. How will they create a model using a globe, using a ball? How can they create a experiential model on this? And the fourth one, which is most commonly spoken about, different kinds of assessments. We all know different kinds of assessments now. One is the regular assessment, other one is the formative, diagnostic assessment, summative assessment, or even asking check for understanding questions can be part of assessment. So we are aware of assessments. I'm not going to deep dive into that, but let's look at how we are going to look at social studies in the classroom now. The first one is collaborative learning. So, before we dive into our discussion on how we are going to achieve all this, I'm going to introduce these key terms. First one is collaborative learning. So, this approach encourages teamwork, as the name itself says, collaboration, teamwork, or peer learning. And the second one is discovery based learning. So, discovery based learning is something that helps students actively explore, do their own research, observe, and learn. And the last one, which is slightly similar to discovery based learning, we'll see the difference later. Discovery, explorative learning, this also helps students to explore the resource on their own and they'll be able to connect it with the real world. So, let us begin with the first one, collaborative learning. So what is collaborative learning then? Collaborative learning, like I said before, the name also says collaboration. So here the entire classroom runs on the activities. So you as a teacher will become a guide or a mentor, and you will guide the students through the engagements. You will provide them with resources, you will provide them with case studies or any other kind of group task, and this will take time for your preparation. So, with reference to the previous learning, here you can introduce a new material to the students. So, what is the result of collaborative learning then? Here, there will be a very higher engagement. What happens in a collaborative learning is that when the students are doing group activities, they will share their knowledge, they will learn from each other, and they will also clarify the misconceptions. So, let us look at an example now. The most commonly used think, pair, share example. Here, you as a teacher will provide them with a tricky question or a tricky task, and the students on their own they will think about it, and they will start discussing with their partner. They will share their thought, they will listen to the partner's thoughts, and they will share it to the entire class. Think, pair, share, or write, pair, share, both are similar. So the other example which will work really well in a higher grade, especially grade 8, 9 and 10, is the fish bowl debate. Here you as a teacher pick a topic and provide the topic, so that the team will come up with one person on the agreeing side and the other person on the disagreeing side. Other members in the group can take different responsibilities like taking notes, keeping the time, etc. And you as a teacher can go and mentor and see how the students are responding to the task. So this is all about collaborative learning. We will look at discovery learning. Discovery learning is similar to inquiry based learning. Yes, here it encourages students to make connection to the real world and explore, and makes them inquisitive. They start thinking, they become very curious, they want to make connections with the real world, and they actively discover knowledge as well. They're constantly learning. And what happens with the teacher interaction here? Teacher, you as a teacher will require a lot of preparation before doing discovery learning in the classroom. You need to do a proper, thorough research on the material and provide the right content in the class. This also leads to higher engagement in the class, but again, there are disadvantages to this. Not every student will be participating in discovery learning, unlike in collaborative learning. Here, interaction, although increases in terms of exploring and performing experiments, like somebody mentioned, using maps is a problem. So, discovery learning method can be used. Um, so, there is a learning material or example document that we have shared in the chat box that is for your reference. You can use it. Please refer to that. You will see a lot more examples in the PDFs. So let us look at one example here. This is more of exploring kind of an example where you're asking the student. Here is an example. Grade 7 students have a chapter called buildings. So as a teacher, I'm giving them an example. I'm giving them a task that I'll ask them to visit historical places in their town, in their cities. Whichever is a historical place in their city, they can visit that place, make a note of it, if possible take pictures of it, and they can come to the class next day and explain it to the whole class. What did I see yesterday? What is um, the building? How did they construct? All these discussions can be led in the class, and based on these tasks I will lead my class to the chapter building. So this is a discovery learning example. Next one is exploration based learning or the interpretation based learning. Uh, this is very similar to discovery based learning. So what happens here is it is more of real world connection. It encourages students to make connection to the real world, explore, and make them again inquisitive. And here, teacher interaction um, will also become very important, because teachers should be providing with real world situation to explain the new concepts. um, Higher engagement in the class, obviously this will also have a lot of group discussions or individual activities. The most commonly used example for this is, especially in the political science, uh, democracy chapter. Here is one example that I thought about: voting. So if you're asking the student group to select their class leader without even introducing democracy as a chapter, so you're asking them to select a class leader, then you're asking them to select a health leader or a discipline leader or different kinds of leader in your classroom. So they will vote for the particular person and they will choose their leader. So this way you have already made a real life connection, explored it, and you are connecting it back to the classroom. Let us pause and reflect. If you have any concerns, any questions, Let us take some questions. So we have looked at what NEP talks about, especially for the social studies, and we have also looked at three different kinds of learning methods. One is the collaborative learning, other one is the discovery based learning, and the third one is explorative or interpretation based learning. So, is there any question? How does one balance course coverage with critical thinking? Uh, how does one balance course coverage with critical thinking? So, if you look at collaborative learning or discovery learning, explorative learning, all of these things are talking about critical thinking. You are giving them a task, you are asking them to connect with a real world situation, and you are building the topic on based on the results, right? So especially in collaborative learning, you also see that the students are engaging in a group task. What kind of activities can we involve our children? um, so I have already shared a document with you. There is a document shared with you in the chat box. You can see different kinds of activities that you can try in your social classes, especially. So there are activities like, of course, the ones that I mentioned: think, pair, share, or fish bowl debate. You can also try projects, you can also try seminars in the higher grades. Now here is an interesting question. In election process there should be only two parties. How can we say that in multiple party system that the party wins election? So I was just giving an example of how you can introduce democracy in the classroom. So if you ask a student to select class leader, and if there are four participants, students will choose their leaders based on their connection with the person, how they are close to the person, they will select their leaders. How to relate history with real world learning? Very interesting question. Of course, you will not be able to connect with the real world for history topics for each chapter, but I gave you one example. You know how you can connect the buildings as a chapter to the real world. The other example is you don't have to connect it to the real world alone. You can give them case studies, or you can give activities like role plays, or you can give them a story and ask them to present it in the classroom. So, like I said, there is a PDF that is shared with you. You can go through the material. You can see various examples mentioned in that. Okay. So, moving on, I see that there are still a lot of questions. We will take it at the end of the session again. So, I'm going to move to the next part of the session. So different strategies and approaches to create lesson plan, especially for social. So we have already know what is 5E method. We have used 5E method or the simpler lesson plan methods, but we will look at other lesson plan models also, which will be very effective in social classes. The first one is 4A approach. Um, Here, you begin the class with activity, asking prompting questions, trying to build upon prior knowledge, and giving a task to give a clear picture. And the second step is analysis. So in analysis, what you're going to do as a teacher is that you start classifying information. You start bifurcating all the information that you have gotten from the previous activity, and then you start analyzing it. What is the correct one, what is the wrong one, and clarifying the misconception. At the same time, in the abstraction, the next method, you start focusing on the prior knowledge plus deeper understanding of the topic. This is where you start introducing to the material, you start explaining the material. And in the last step, the last four, last A, you will start giving them the task. So going through the activity to analyzing the content or the responses received, to abstraction, to um, again application. So you are going to give a task wherein students apply their prior knowledge plus the new information that they have learned, and they start checking their knowledge. So this is also your assessment. You can also do it as an individual activity or a group activity, or you can close class with application task. The best example for this one is map reading in geography class, or again role playing in history class. So you can try these activities. There is no rule as to you have to start from activity to analysis to abstraction to application. This is like a loop. You can introduce one particular topic and then move to the analysis, or you can start from analysis to abstraction. This is not for one lesson plan. This 4A approach, you can use it twice in a lesson plan. I have shared a sample of lesson plan for this. Use the resource. Although the lesson plan that I have shared is not very detailed, I have given smaller instructions so that you can also build upon it based on your class's responsibilities. I mean, sorry, responses, and also how differently tasks you can add there. Yes. So, what is the advantage of 4A approach? The first um, advantage is it gives you a clear structure. As a teacher, you will know which task to do first, which abstraction to talk about, and how do I introduce a new material, and how do I assess in the class. So, you will have a clear picture on this. And next one is engagement. Here, especially with this method, it is very easier to see higher engagement. Again, you can also use collaborative learning approach for this lesson plan. You can give different tasks here. See how I am combining the two things now: the collaborative learning, discovery learning, explorative learning that we have already seen, and now we are looking at the different lesson plan models that we can merge together. So in engagement part, you can give them group task or individual task, and you will see very higher engagement in the classroom. but what is the disadvantage? It is very rigid kind of a lesson plan, because here when you're creating a lesson plan, you have to think very precisely about certain things only. So when you're creating this lesson plan, make sure that you are picking this lesson plan model for a specific topic and um, difficult topics, so that you complete it in one particular class only. And it is very time consuming as a teacher for you to plan plus executing in class, because you're doing two activities, one in the activity and two in the application. So in 4A we have seen activity, analysis, abstraction, and application. So you have done two application tasks, so this will become a little time consuming. So I will pause for a bit before I move to the next one. um, So there are resources that are shared with you in the chat. Please do refer to that. I have shared examples and explanation for collaborative learning, discovery learning, and explorative learning. Along with that, I have shared a sample lesson plan for 4A approach, and one more, the one that we are going to see in some time. So let us move to the second one, the concentric model. This is the most commonly used model. Here you begin the class with teacher led. This is very easier for introducing history classes. You start with explaining the content in the chapter, like what is the objective of the class. For example, if you're talking about Vijayanagara Empire, you start talking about when they started ruling, where were they located, who started the Vijayanagara Empire, and then you move to the group practice. Here again, group practice is where we are talking about the collaborative learning. So you give different tasks here. Um, in history class, what is the group activity that can be given to the students? Most commonly shared activity is the role play activity, but if not that, you can also give them research papers, or you can also give them activities like um, jigsaw puzzle, wherein they start putting the buildings or things like that in a place. So, or you can also do a quiz activity. And next one is individual practice, wherein you give task for individual students. So group activity is done. You have arrived at a conclusion, and how many of them have understood. You have clarified the doubts of all the groups. Then you move to the final one, that is individual practice. Individual practice is where you are going to assess the students also. You can ask individual students quizzes. You can also ask them questions and ask them to write the answers and check the answers, or you can also try with the discovery learning or explorative learning. For example, you can ask them to do activity like go home and do a research on this particular thing. Okay, since we were talking about Vijayanagara kingdom, ask them a question on all of you go home and study about who was the last king of Vijayanagara empire. How did they fall? Even though you have not introduced the topic, this might be your next day's topic. You have given them an activity. That way they are prepared for the next day's class. um, in the conclusion part, which is the end of the class, you can close down on what you have introduced, what activity they have done, what is the individual activity they have got, and summarize everything and close it. You can also give them a creative homework here. uh, like I said before, this is like the easiest lesson plan model which you can use for all the subjects. So there is no order for this. So since it's a concentric circle, you can see this as you can start from group practice to individual practice, then to teacher led, or you can skip group practice and start from teacher led to individual practice to conclusion. So it is all depending on the topics you are choosing. It is all depending on the objectives you are creating and the task that you want to give. Do you want to conduct a group activity and an individual activity in the same class? Is totally up to you. But if you can create everything and complete an entire lesson plan within the given 45 minutes, that will be well and good. Okay, let's look at the disadvantages. Like I said, advantages, this is very clear focused. You know what you are expecting out of the class. You know what tasks you are giving. You know what is the result from each task, and it's very flexible. You can modify it accordingly, as in like I mentioned before, you can start with the group activity, then move to the teacher led. There is no clear structure as such. You can move around in this particular lesson plan model. This works really well, especially while you're teaching history chapters. What is the disadvantage for teachers? This is a very simple lesson plan, but at the same time, this becomes very less challenging for students in grade 9 and 10. Although it is not time consuming like the 4A approach, this will become very simple. It can get rigid at times when you're creating group activities. Like somebody mentioned, yes, it also gets difficult if it is time bound. So every lesson plan is like that. It gets difficult when it is time bound. You have to complete the syllabus, you have to complete the given task. But concentric model so far is the most easier one. um, yes, let us look at the last and the most important model. This is highly effective model, 7E model. So all of us have learnt about 5E model. What is 5E model? I would definitely like to see some responses on it. What is 5E model? Engage, yes. Explore, engage, explore, yes. Engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and I'm waiting for Usha ma'am to respond. Yes, elaborate and evaluate. Absolutely. It's engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. Um, Thank you so much. I can see a lot of you are responding now. Let us look at 7E model and see how it is slightly different from 5E. Yes. First one is engage. What do we do in engage? Again, we give the activity, we start asking the questions, or um, we will ask the students to explain. Then is elicit. What happens in elicit? So elicit is more like you asking quizzes, you're asking MCQs, or similar to our diagnostic assessment. For example, I walk into my classroom for a lesson on um, rise of nationalism in Europe. So I go to the class and I ask the question on when did the French Revolution start and how did it affect the rise of nationalism in Europe. So I already know that my students have learned French Revolution in their previous class. So I know that they have prior knowledge. So I'm beginning my class with asking fewer questions. I have already engaged them in a task. Now I am asking them questions on prior knowledge. So this is a good opportunity for a teacher to clarify the misconceptions on their prior knowledge before beginning the next topic. And explore is where you start introducing the new material. And when you are introducing the new material, you can introduce through an activity. How For example, in a democracy lesson, so I gave an example earlier as well. So how do you choose a class leader, and then how you can connect them to how the elections are happening now. So you are exploring the topic, and then you are explaining it. What is democracy? Where did it begin? So in elaborate is where you start explaining all the content, entirely teacher's responsibility. Up to explain, the student involvement is higher. You become a guide, you become a mentor, you become a facilitator. At elaborate level, you are entirely wearing a teacher's hat and you are introducing the new material and explaining thoroughly to the class. And in the next, you're going to extend it. So this is where you start challenging the student. So you already know what happened in France, how it affected rise of nationalism. So we have looked at all these topics. We know how unification of Berlin happened, how unification of Italy happened, and now how do we extend it? So we have learnt about unification of Germany, unification of Italy, unification of Britain. So do you think The rise of nationalism in Europe was the reason for World War One. So you are extending it and you are challenging the students. So you have not spoken about World War One yet. So when you're introducing these topics in the classroom, the students start thinking critically. So again, the critical thinking will come into play here. So they start thinking critically. They do their own research. They also go back and study, or you can provide them with certain reading material. And the last one is again evaluate. This is how you conclude a class. Extension is done. After extend, you're going to clarify the doubts, you're going to clear all the misconceptions, and you move to the evaluation. Evaluation is where you start asking check for understanding questions, and then you start asking students to summarize. So this is what is different about 7E model. In evaluation, you are going to let the students handle the class. They are going to summarize the class. They will explain to the whole class that these are the things I studied in, I learned in today's class. I learned about French Revolution. I moved to Rise of Nationalism. In Rise of Nationalism chapter, I studied these topics, and I started thinking about whether this was the reason for World War One. So that is how you're going to evaluate. So I have also shared a sample lesson plan here. Please take a look at it. You can build up on it. Um, Let us look at the advantages and disadvantages. So like I said before, all these lesson plan models give you a clear structure on what you have to teach, what task you have to give to the students, how the engagement in the classroom will be. But again, some of these lesson plan creation itself will be time consuming. Although it is time consuming, please make sure that you are taking some quality time on creating the lesson plan. Spend a lot of time on doing proper research for each lesson, and create a lesson plan, especially when you are giving a group activity or a task for discovery based learning, or even collaborative learning or explorative learning. So please do a thorough research on all the tasks that you want to give in the class, whether it is case study, whether it is a topic for debate or anything. Um Although it is time consuming, this is highly effective. This is also very rigid. You might not be able to try the same lesson plan module in a different subject. For example, you'll be able to try 7E model in a history class, but you might not be able to try it in political science or geography. Or you might be able to try it in one particular topic in geography, but not all the topics in geography. So you as a decision maker go through the modules again and again, and decide which one suits your class better. Yes. So, so these three models, 7E model, 4A approach, and also concentric model, these are all highly effective models. Um, as I've shared the sample lesson plan, go through the lesson plans, build on the lesson plan, create your own lesson plans, and use it. There are other approaches also. For example, there is the most commonly used approach, social inquiry or inquiry based learning. Um, so, in this approach, it's more of students gathering the information, students asking the questions, or students doing their own research. And what happens with this is students are able to explore, and they will be able to analyze their perspective. um, Example is given already. One is the group discussion, another is research. This will be very helpful for the student to build their knowledge, and the teacher's role will be little lesser. The next one is using evidence. Students will be able to gather evidence research on their own. Here also again case studies, or watching a video, documentaries, articles. um, like we discussed before, if you're talking about World War One, so if they are able to go through certain case studies or material, um, student friendly books, um, then they are gathering information, and they are able to share the evidence in the classroom. Graphic organizer is something that is most commonly used in all the subjects which you are all aware of. This helps in organizing our own thoughts, um, and it also helps in reflecting my or our learning and end result of it. So we have been using graphic organizer in primary, middle school, high school for all subjects, so I will not deep dive into that. This is something that is highly helpful in geography classes or the history classes wherein the map activities are given. Students will be the visualize, locate and reflect. Here students will be able to visualize a situation and identify the same as part of an activity. So creating a timeline, creating or identifying locations on the map, all these are part of visualizing, locating and reflecting. Yes. Um, the other key features you should add in your lesson plan also while you are executing a lesson is adding vocabulary. Like if you are talking about new words, if you are talking about secularism, you cannot assume that the students know what secularism is. So you will have to build that vocabulary system in a classroom, as in when you are introducing a new topic in the classroom, make sure that you mention new words with their meaning. If possible, write it on the board or make them write it in their notebook. That way you're also giving them additional information, additional knowledge. And always recall what they have learned before, connect it back to their previous learning or prior learning, uh, and explain. As much as possible, do not randomly ask questions in the class, but always prepare for the questions. Whether it is check for understanding question or quizzes, you prepare before you ask in the classroom. Mind map is something that will help students remember the concepts very easily. So while giving the notes or while providing the notes, please give them in mind map. Some of the students will be able to remember concepts very easily if they use mind maps. And timeline, so I have seen this in my classroom, that students always forget timelines. I ask when did the Sepoy mutiny happen, and they don't know the year. So that is because they always forget the years. So how do I build on it? So I always created a table for them. I mentioned the years and what were the important dates, when what happened. So ensure that you are creating timeline. Don't create it every day, create a timeline for an entire chapter and share it. You can share it as a PDF before, or you can share it as a printable copy to them, and so that they can take a printout of it. The last one is, do not miss out on the remediation. um, After conducting your regular classes, after conducting assessment, or after conducting any kind of assessment, make sure that you are conducting a remedial class. Remedial class is where you will be able to explain, you will be able to identify how many of the students have done well, how many of the students are struggling. Especially in terms of geography, remediation plays um, very well when you are conducting it very effectively. In remediation, you can also take students' help. Again, it can become a collaborative learning or discovery learning, wherein you can give them the same activity or a different activity and try it. Yes, I hope all of you have made note of all the things. Let us take some questions. Okay, I'm just going to summarize the whole thing. We started with looking at NEP and social studies, how NEP talks about social studies, or what are the important things that NEP emphasizes. Most importantly, NEP emphasizes on critical thinking, and you as a teacher, your role becomes very critical here. So, in social, especially, something that you should be focusing on is using Indian knowledge system and experiential learning and assessment methodologies. These are something NEP talks about. There are other topics also, other important aspects also. I'm only focusing on these three things, these three, four things. And the next one that we looked at was different approaches of learning. The first one being the collaborative learning. And I also spoke about how you can include collaborative learning in different lesson plans that I showed, or you can also include collaborative learning in your 5E model or any other lesson plan model that you are using. And we also discussed about discovery based learning or explorative learning or interpretation based learning, how these two learning approaches will connect to the real world, and how the students will be able to connect to the real situations and build on their deeper knowledge. And we looked at three different models of lesson plans. So first one being 4A approach. In 4A approach, we looked at activity. We began with activity, and then we moved to analysis, and then we moved to abstraction, and at the end we went to the application, wherein you give a task to them. So 4A approaches, like I mentioned before, also the disadvantage is that you might have to give two tasks or two activities, but at the same time it encourages higher engagement. Huh. And the next one that we saw was the concentric model of teaching, where you begin with teacher led to group practice to individual practice and end with the conclusion, wherein you get a lot of time to spend on group activity. You have introduced a new material, and then the students will do a group activity based on the material that you have introduced. And once the group activity is done, they will go through an individual activity, and then you will conclude the class. In conclusion, again, like I said, you can ask the students to summarize the class, or you can ask them quizzes or questions and close the class. um, um, the disadvantages here is it's very simple. It becomes very rigid for a teacher though. And the next approach that we saw was 7E approach, which is very similar to 5E approach. The only addition to that is um, elicit and extend, two things that is new in 7E model, wherein in elicit you start with asking questions based on their prior knowledge, but you start with engaging the class. First is you give them an activity, and then you move to the um, elicit part, and then you start exploring, or you start introducing to the new material, connect to the prior knowledge and explain, connect to the real life. You start making connections, and then you elaborate on it. When extension comes, or how will you extend it, you can challenge the students to apply their knowledge, whatever they have learned already in the class. You start asking them to apply, or you start asking them to do the group activity, or the best example is seminars or presentations or debates. These are an example for extensions. Then the last one is evaluation. Of course, evaluation does not mean an assessment, but what you're going to do here is you're going to ask them check for understanding question, and you're going to summarize the entire class. So I have just summarized everything that we just did in this entire session.
Miss Ashika, we have a couple of questions. How
Yeah.
can we make social studies interesting in primary classes? There is one of the questions asked by one of the teachers.
Okay. So how do we make social science classes interesting in primary classes? So again, You can use collaborative learning methods. Of course, you will not be able to use examples like case studies or seminars or debates, etc. But you can try using activities like think, pair, and share, or write, pair, and share. They will just write answer to your question and share it with their partner. That way, they are engaging in an activity. Apart from that, you can ask them simple questions like if there is a chapter on environmental science, no, for primary. So when they're studying environmental science, you can ask them simple things like there is a chapter on solar system. You can ask questions on what do you see in the night sky, what is the difference between a sky sorry, stars and planets, like simple questions. So these are all connecting to the real life. They are explorative learning. It's a very interesting question. I will try and collate some examples for primary classrooms also, and if possible I will update it on the link that is shared.
Thank you for that elaborative reply, Ms. Ashika. We have one more question uh, asked by Suganya Shekhar, ma'am. She says she's asking challenges. So students do not come forward to discuss. So what do we do to encourage group discussions?
This is not specific to social subject, but I think this is a very common problem faced by all teachers. Not every student in the classroom would like to participate in an activity. So something that I tried as a teacher was that I picked a student who was not very responsive as the group leader, and I gave that student the responsibility. I made sure that the smart student or the students who actively participated in the class, to make sure everybody in the group were able to answer. So that way everybody kind of participated, but absolutely there was no 100% participation. There was participation.
Yeah, Ms. Ashika, that was a good reply. Uh, just checking on the questions if there are any.
So I have a question though. So if you were to apply any of these approaches plus a lesson plan in your class, which one would that be?
Ms. Ashika, if you could repeat the question once again for our
Uh,
participant teachers.
yes. So I was asking, if you were to pick an approach from here and a lesson plan module, which one would that be? Which one would you use? 5E. I did not talk about 5E, I spoke about 7E. The reason I didn't talk about inquiry based learning and 5E approach is because we have spoken about these two multiple times. Um, so I thought I will introduce all the teachers to a new model and new approaches. 7E model, yes, 7E model, 7E approach, 7E model. Thank you so much. Concentric model is the most easier one. Yes, yes. Depends on the topic. I think I missed one question. How many students don't like social studies? How to raise their interest in the subject? Um, so that is a whole purpose of collaborative learning and discovery learning and explorative learning, wherein you give them opportunities to engage in the activities. You create your lesson plan in such a way that there are a lot of tasks for the students to do, and they will start doing the research. They will go through the material. They will do their own research, and they will start showing little bit of interest. It's also a misconception that social studies is a boring subject. Yes, I think Um, yes, I think I have answered as many questions as possible. So, before closing this session, I would like to share a fun activity with you. Um, Please solve this puzzle. You can see the link which is shared in the chat. It says www.jigsawplanet. Please take some time and do this activity. Yes, I think I'm done. Thank you so much for all the teachers who took part in this webinar.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ashika A Rao, for a very engaging and informative session for our community. I'm sure that our teachers have got a lot of takeaways from this session, such as collaborative learning, discovery learning, exploration based learning, 4A approach, 7E model. We will be sharing the record of the participation for this webinar by tomorrow. Once you fill the feedback form, do attend our next session on 2nd May 2024. The topic is aligning learning outcomes and assessment. The registration link is being displayed on the chat box. Thank you so much everyone for joining us today. To register for more such upcoming webinars, please visit our sender app. Please don't forget to fill the feedback form for claim your participation certificate. Once again, thank you so much for the participation and good night.